Well, I think there is a growing consensus amongst people who I respect about this whole militarization of the capital, Washington, D.C. It is a very different perspective from, I guess, your vapid partisans on both the left and the right. And that conclusion is that this is evidence of a very unhealthy regime. This is not a regime that is feeling secure. It is not a regime that is stable. It appears to be a regime in desperate search desperately trying to signal legitimacy and strength. This is a show of force for the world and for the American people to show that, hey, the United States government is very much in control of the situation. The United States government is not teetering on the brink of collapse, and obviously, as a direct result of what happened on January 6th, I maintain what I said back then, that the events of January 6th made the federal government look weak and feckless, and that's a good thing. It made the federal government look vulnerable. It made the federal government look somewhat illegitimate, because the people who went in there, they degraded the seriousness of the government. They made, the Capitol not seem like this sacred temple, of our civic religion. And so what I see here going on is they're trying to compensate for a lack of respect for Congress by making up more of a respectfulness of the military, not necessarily respect in a positive sense, but just an acknowledgement of strength. When you see walls being erected around government buildings, when you see troops on every street corner in a capital city, you don't think of democracy, you don't think of self-rule, you don't think that the government is of, for, and by the people. It would seem to suggest that the government is in fear of its people and is trying to intimidate them. As Richard Barris said today on his show, this seems to be more akin to what you'd see of a military junta trying to signal to the people that they have a strong grip on power when they start to lose a bit of their legitimacy. But this is not the way that a democratic state tries to signal its legitimacy. Because the reason why people respect democratic states is because they think that there's a fair electoral process. That's why democracies are able to operate. Obviously, this cycle, the U.S. government has lost a lot of that legitimacy, and a good chunk, maybe not 50%, but let's say 1/2 of the politically engaged in this country, that portion of the population no longer sees our election system as legitimate, and so in their eyes, there is no democratic legitimacy to the incoming Biden administration. And so this more basic martial legitimacy is sort of acting as a stopgap. So ultimately, I see this as a good sign. Yesterday to me was really the only bad story that potentially seriously bad story in the long run that I have talked about on this channel. Everything else has given me hope, and this is a part of that. This gives me hope because it's a good thing that the government is in fear, that the feds, the Congress, the DC, the whole DC swamp, even the people who aren't elected, the lobbyists, the think tankers, they're all very uncomfortable with this situation. The Pentagon just had to issue a statement after January 6th, reminding its soldiers, its men, that you're not allowed to engage in sedition and mutiny or whatever else they were talking about. I mean, that's not something that a military normally has to remind their soldiers of. Now, I guess to cover sort of, I think, more of the insanity that a lot of people are being driven to in this country, folks on the left and right who are, sort of in the, let's say, unintellectual spectrum. They're on the, they're not that deep knowledge-wise into politics, but they're very passionate. I think we all know people like that. Well, the folks on the right, and I guess this came out of Q World, but it seems to be gaining momentum and is very popular, that, the reason why there's all these streets, or there's all these soldiers in the streets of Washington is that Trump's gonna, stop the inauguration, and they're gonna arrest Biden and all the evil deep staters. That I just think is total fiction, not going to happen. But interestingly enough, your vapid left-wingers, I guess the people who you would call liberal Democrats, or at least who once were those, the people who watch MSNBC and CNN, they are deathly afraid of the exact same thing, that all these troops are in Washington because Trump is plotting a secret coup. And hey, I guess maybe there's a chance that that is going to happen and that I'm totally wrong, but we'll know in 2 days. But I'm 99.99% sure that's not going to happen. I think that a much more reasonable explanation for why all these troops are there is because the Pentagon and Washington in general is legitimately fearful of what might happen. And they do not think that a good portion of this country still respects them. And, if you're an authority figure and your subordinates won't obey you voluntarily, your only recourse then is to use force to compel them to obey you. But this, of course, is not sustainable. No regime can operate without, a massive supermajority consent of the governed. And if you lose, let's say a third of the country, that's not going to end well for you. Whether it's through intimidation or through, what's a good word? Sedation, pacification. There has to be something going on to keep the people docile. You have to somehow keep them from going against you, and you have to make them listen to you somehow. And most Western governments sedate their people through a combination of buying their votes through welfare, very generous welfare states, and also by talking about democracy and how we govern ourselves. Well, Congress in Washington has not been successful in the last year in buying people's votes through massive welfare. In fact, they've been doing the opposite. Local governments, state and local governments mostly, putting people out of work by shutting down their businesses. You combine that with a lack of an increase in welfare payments from Washington, you have a lot of people who are not being sedated by the welfare state. And additionally, because of what happened since November, there is a large portion of the country that does not feel sedated by the talk of, democracy. And so it is those people who they hope to intimidate with this show of force. And do I think that it would actually be necessary that all these troops actually go into action? Absolutely not. I do not think that there will be some massive siege or uprising to overthrow Washington, D.C. on January 20th. The military, I think, is smart enough to know that. But but this massive, overwhelming, overkill presence is about optics. The big fence or wall, really, that they built around the Capitol. That is to signal to the American people that you are not welcome here, that this is our house and not yours. The DC establishment has become increasingly defiant of the voters who dare challenge them in their legitimacy. They're not responding well to all this. They're just lashing out in anger, which is a good thing because they are instigating more and more people to oppose them. They are agitating those who are already unhappy with the current state of affairs. And so while I don't know what exactly will happen on Wednesday, January the 20th, I believe that's Wednesday, right? Today's the 18th, I think. I am fairly confident that it will not be a moment of healing and unity. I do not think that it will increase the legitimacy of the regime. I don't know what sort of protesting or even rioting might occur in D.C. on that day. January the 20th, 2017 saw massive rioting in D.C. I don't think you'll see anything like that again. But you know, who knows? Maybe something along the lines of January the 6th, but checked by that massive military presence. Either way, it'll be quite the show. And so with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.